Hello and welcome to the Ross and Cromarty Citizens Advice Bureau Right Here, Right Now podcast. My name is Emily and I'm one of the advisors here at CAB. And joining me today I have Alison and Martin, who are both advisors in our Highland Housing and Homelessness project. Today we are going to discuss social housing, and we're going to cover the system that's in place in the Highland Council region for social housing, a bit about how the application process works and what can and cannot be considered in your application. So Alison, can you tell me a little bit about the system that's in place in the Highlands?
Yes, can do, Emily. So the Highland Council area, as I'm sure you're aware, is pretty vast, with people living in both urban and rural and remote areas. The Highland Council operate what's called a common housing register with the principal housing associations in the Highlands. So anyone applying for social housing needs to just initially complete one application form, which is referred to as an HHR, Highland Housing Register form, in order to be considered by all of the partner landlords, such as the council themselves or Alban Housing Association or Cairn Housing Association, etc. Anyone 16 years of age or over can apply for a house via the HHR. Supporting information may also be requested, and if additional medical information is to be considered, then a further form called an accessible housing form may need to be submitted. The applications are then assessed and prioritised based on the HHR allocation policy and in compliance with housing law. The Highland Council policy is available to view or download on the Highland Council website. The HHR partners operate what's called a points-based scheme for most of the Highland areas, with the exception of Caithness, where they operate what's referred to as a choice-based letting system. We're not going to go into that system in detail, but essentially it allows applicants to bid for available properties, and offers are made to the bidder with the highest priority.
Okay, so in the Highland area we have the common register, so that doesn't just include council houses, it also includes housing associations and other partner landlords. So if you apply for social housing, you're put on the list and it's available to all of these providers.
That's absolutely correct, yeah.
So if you're looking to apply for social housing, what is the process? How do you go about doing that?
Hello, Emily.
Hi, Martin.
To apply, you must complete the HHR application form, which is available from the Highland Council Housing Department, offices of housing associations, and service points within local communities. You can complete a paper form or you can apply online via the Highland Council website. Information should be available in other languages and in other formats when required, such as Braille or audio tape. You can request assistance with the process from support agencies and advice agencies such as Citizens Advice Bureau. It is important that you make as strong a case as possible to support your need for accommodation and to maximise your points. So include, for example, details for overcrowding in particular, with older children sharing rooms, if you're living with friends or relatives, if you have ill health. This will normally then trigger another to be completed called accessible housing form. Problems with your existing accommodation, including disrepair, it might be worth asking for a receipt for paper submissions.
Okay, so you can complete the form and there are various ways you can do that, either on a paper form or online. If there's alternative formats needed, that's also available. But if you have medical conditions that might require you to have a certain type of housing, you might also need to complete a second form, which is the accessible housing form as well. Did I get that right?
That's absolutely spot on.
Fab. So Alison, I think a lot of people, probably including myself, are aware that when you apply for social housing, you are allocated points. Can you tell me how that works and what type of things you are awarded points for?
Sure. So again, you would refer to the HHR policy. The point-based system awards points having assessed your housing need and in line with the allocation policy, and your position on the waiting list is determined by the number of points awarded based on your particular circumstances. So in the Highland system, they'll consider things like, are you homeless and therefore entitled to homelessness points? If you're living in a home where you have limited or no security of tenure, And points can be awarded in those circumstances. Points can be awarded if you need to share facilities with others who are out with your household. If you're living in the private sector and your home is in a poor condition, you can be awarded points. Points may be awarded if you're experiencing overcrowding or your current home is underoccupied. The Highland Council have a category called two households for one, where you can be awarded points if you're currently the tenant of one of the partner landlords and you want to form a new household with another tenant or partner landlord. And by doing that, you surrender two properties in exchange for a new tenancy. If you've got care and support needs, or if your physical and or mental health or medical condition is made worse in your current housing, you can receive points. If you have a need to reside in a certain area, which is classed as a relationship to a particular community, you can receive points. And additionally, the Highland Council scheme can award what's referred to as special allocation status points in exceptional circumstances. And those points are subject to approval by senior staff.
Okay, so there are, a wide range of things that points are considered for, but it's very much dependent on your individual circumstances, and the council will decide how those points are allocated based on the HHR policy, which you can view so that you can understand exactly why you're being awarded certain points.
Absolutely. It's all laid out in the policy, and it's very clearly defined what the points are awarded for and how many points you'll get in each circumstance so that you can work out yourself what you might be entitled to.
Okay. So what are some of the things that the council must consider when looking at your application, Martin?
So the council must consider, are you entitled to be admitted to the housing register and therefore eligible for housing accommodation? Immigration rules disbar some people from access to public housing lists. People who are eligible would include existing public sector tenants, existing public sector tenants wishing to apply for transfer, existing joint tenants, any British nationals who are habitually resident, and other categories of people who have rights to be included with reference to their immigration status. Social housing landlords must give reasonable preference to people who meet three criteria. The first being people who are occupying a house which is considered to be providing unsatisfactory housing conditions and they therefore have an unmet housing need. Secondly, people who are homeless are threatened with homelessness as defined in law. And thirdly, people who are under-occupying the property they live in.
Okay, so a wide range of things that are considered, but those three criteria kind of really stand out to me. So there is a reasonable preference afforded to those whose home is not providing them with satisfactory living conditions, those who are legally defined as homeless, or those who are under occupying the property they live in. So by that, do you mean that their home is much larger than what they require?
Yes, and that's very often the case.
Is okay. Yeah, completely understand that. And Alison, what are some of the things that the council should not be taking into account?
So factors the HHR partners cannot take into account include things like the length of time an applicant has lived in an area, the income of the applicants and or of their family, the age of the applicant as long as they're over 16 years of age. In those circumstances, however, they can take into consideration some allocating some properties where the properties have been designed or adapted for older people, for example, or supported housing for younger people. They must not take into account the debt relating to the tenancy of a house where the applicant was not the tenant, or any rent or debt to a previous tenancy which is no longer outstanding, or where the previous tenant's debt there was previous tenant debt, but the applicant was paying the landlord and has been paying for a period of at least 3 months and is continuing to pay. Things like council tax arrears can't be used to refuse an allocation.
Okay, so there's quite a few things that really shouldn't be covered. I guess, again, the length of time someone's lived in an area, that's quite clear. Income, that's quite clear as to why that shouldn't be considered. Age, I can understand why, with there's specific housing that's adapted perhaps to meet the needs of an older person, why it may be considered in certain circumstances. And just to be clear, with debts relating to a tenancy, so it can't be considered if there was a debt, but that's now paid off, that's been cleared, that can't be considered.
That's the case, and also where there's historical debt, but the tenant or the applicant has actually entered into a payment arrangement and has been maintaining that payment arrangement for at least 3 months. And that's a query that we quite often get from our clients. That's something that people aren't aware of, and they wonder why they have been temporarily excluded from allocation, and that's the reason. They can be excluded until they enter into that 3-month payment arrangement and then continue to pay debts on a tenancy.
Okay, so for someone who maybe is in debt, particularly rent arrears, really they need to be looking to try and start to sort out their debt, not completely pay it off, but start to take the right steps to start to work out a payment plan or something like that. Otherwise, that would be taken into account in their housing application.
I think what it leads to is a suspension. So they would be suspended for an allocation if they hadn't entered into that repayment arrangement. So absolutely, we would be encouraging people to enter into a repayment arrangement with the local authority to try and resolve that debt.
Okay. And is there anything else that you feel is quite key to know or should be covered today?
It can take some time to receive a suitable allocation. It's therefore important to ensure you respond annually to the Highland Council's request to re-register to update on whether you wish to remain on the list or be taken off, but also to inform the Highland Council of any changes which could affect your assessment and priority.
Okay, so just to clarify, so you need to re-register annually, so every year, and will the council, send a request to you to do that?
The council will send you a request and ask you to update that. And I have had clients in the past who have failed to do that. So it is really important that they do look to do that as soon as they get it and respond accordingly.
To make sure that you're staying on that register, and also to inform them of any changes which would affect your assessment. So any changes per se in the family makeup, in your medical conditions, things like that, things that could change your needs. It would be really good to inform them as soon as possible.
And it can also aid you to get a tenancy faster. If you fail to update them and changes, especially if there's been, an addition to the family household or somebody has new medical needs, it's really important that they do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both very much for joining me today. I think that's an excellent place to wrap up. I certainly have a much better understanding of how the system works and how the application process works, and I hope that our listeners do too. If anybody listening needs assistance to apply for social housing or is having issues with an ongoing application, you can contact your local Citizens Advice Bureau. You can contact us at Ross and Cromarty Citizens Advice Bureau by phone on 01349 883333 or by email at advisor@allnesscab.casonline.org.uk. As always, if you have any topics that you would like us to discuss, you can comment below, contact us via our Facebook page, or email us using the email address I've already mentioned. We're always happy to look into topics that people want us to cover, and happy to do the research and to discuss them. Thank you both so much for joining me. This has been really, really interesting, and I think we'll wrap it up there.
Thanks, Emily. Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye.